Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules here for Whatculture.com, and this is the thing, we all make mistakes sometimes, so it's more than okay to say, let's just have a do-over lads, a round robin as it were. Well, you know what, this apparently extends to actors playing roles, as sometimes they straight up just copy what made them famous before or retool it into a better version for new audiences. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is Whatculture.com, and these are 9 actors who made better versions of previous films. Number 9, Bruce Campbell, The Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. Sam Raimi's classic 1981 low-budget horror flick The Evil Dead helped make Bruce Campbell a household name while also putting the director on the map as a filmmaker to watch. After Raimi's 1986 follow-up Crime Wave was a colossal box office disaster, the director was convinced to write an Evil Dead sequel, which ultimately ended up being as much a remake of the original as it was a sequel. Evil Dead 2 was released the very next year, and much like the first film, it sees Ash facing off against accidentally summoned supernatural forces in a remote cabin in the woods. And there's also a tree that likes to molest people. It's yeah, okay, moving on. Considering the absurdity of Ash going back to the cabin after the horror of his first outing, it's clear that the Evil Dead series isn't slavishly committed to an especially rigid or sensible continuity. Campbell himself has called The Evil Dead 2 a requel, a portmanteau of a remake and a sequel, in that it incorporates many elements of the original film into a follow-up. Obviously, the sequel has a more comedic tone and a tenfold budget, but at its core, it's effectively a more ambitious do-over of the original. Though some prefer the lo-fi charm of its predecessor, Evil Dead 2 is a loonier, more ambitious, and simply better crafted film. Number 8, Ben Stiller, Heavyweights and Dodgeball, a true underdog story. If you don't remember the 1995 comedy Heavyweights, then don't feel too bad. Barely anyone does. The film takes place in a fat camp where the kids staying there are terrorized by a malevolent fitness guru played by Ben Stiller, who, to make matters worse, also has bought the camp. Naturally, Stiller's villain is eventually foiled by a ragtag team of overweight misfits, and a post-credit scene reveals that now he works as a door-to-door salesman selling healing crystals, or as he calls them, transformational facilitators. Oh dear. Well, Dodgeball, released almost a decade later, once again casts Stiller as a pantomime corporate honcho who this time purchases the flailing, down-to-earth gym owned by Peter LaFleur. Stiller's baddie, White Goodman, is wrecked by a team of weirdos in a dodgeball tournament, and at the end of the movie it reveals how he's now become grossly overweight and curses the day that he ever met Chuck Norris. Stiller puts on the same deep, gruff bad guy voice in both movies, has awful hairdos, and pulls a lot of the same demented faces. The fact that the shell plots are incredibly similar and his character trajectory is bafflingly identical is just the icing on the cake. Dodgeball is an unmistakably better film, however, but Heavyweights definitely had its charming moments as well, and weirdly they make for an intriguing double bill. Honestly, go and watch them back to back. It's kind of weird how it all fits up. Number 7, Sean Connery, Thunderball and Never Say Never Again. Sean Connery took up the James Bond mantle for the 4th time in 1965 with Thunderball, an adaptation of Ian Fleming's novel of the same name. It's neither a great Bond flick nor an especially bad one, it's just right in the middle, especially seeing as the underwater action drags on for far too long. But you know what? Connery received plenty of praise for his reliable performance, and it's generally accepted to be a solid entry into the canon. Connery reportedly wasn't particularly satisfied with the film, however, and so 18 years later, he appeared in a re-adaptation of Fleming's novel, though because it wasn't produced by Eon Productions, it didn't count as an official Bond movie. Never Say Never Again was released in 1983, 12 years after Connery's last official appearance as James Bond, and saw a 52-year-old Connery bringing a unique, aged grit to the role. Far from the embarrassment of Roger Moore's later Bond films, Connery doesn't try to mask his age. Instead, he leans directly into it. It doesn't hurt that the villain this time around is vastly superior, and fresh off directing The Empire Strikes Back, Irvin Kershner's filmmaking chops trample all over Terrence Young's work on Thunderball. Though the unofficial remake may not be a real Bond movie, Connery's heart was actually in it this time, and it's a technically superior movie in many areas, while also avoiding Thunderball's lethargic pacing, tone, and feel. Number 6, Christian Bale, 3:10 to Yuma and Hostiles. James Mangold's highly entertaining Western remake 3:10 to Yuma stars Christian Bale as Dan Evans, an impoverished rancher who accepts a mission to transport a dangerous outlaw Ben Wade to a train, after which he'll be hanged for his crimes. However, Evans also has to contend with Wade's gang, which is now led by a deranged criminal, Charlie Prince. A decade later, Bale starred in Scott Cooper's criminally underrated Western Hostiles, playing war veteran Captain Joseph J. Blocker, whose final task before retirement is to escort a terminal terminally ill war chief home to die, despite his own bloody history with the chief. In both films, Bale's protagonist teams up with a group of comrades to transport a man whose death is seemingly imminent, while contending with ambushes and the unforgiving terrain of the Old West. Both movies also feature Ben Foster as a hammy secondary antagonist who ends up being shot and killed, and by the end of both movies, the hero has begun to identify with the rogue that they're actually escorting. Quality-wise, there's actually not much between the two, but for those prepared to get on board with Hostile's slower-paced existential musings, it's ultimately the more rewarding and more memorable of the pair. Yuma is the giddy, popcorn-munching version, and Hostiles tells a far bleaker and less forgiving rendition. Number 5. Ryan Gosling, Drive and The Place Beyond the Pines. The cult smash hit Drive casts Ryan Gosling as an unnamed stuntman who moonlights as a getaway driver while also working a side job as a mechanic. Gosling's protagonist then falls in love with a woman who is already in a relationship, and the movie ends with his life precariously hanging in the balance. Gosling actually played an eerily similar role in the crime drama released the very next year, The Place Beyond the Pines. His protagonist here, Luke, is similarly a stuntman, though this time on a motorcycle rather than a car, who ends up being seduced into a life of crime while also working as a mechanic on the side. Meanwhile, he gets romantically entangled with a former lover who definitely isn't single, and let's just say that things don't go too well for Luke by the end of the movie, or in fact long before the end. Now, there are undeniable tonal, stylistic and structural differences between the two films, but the similarities are far too numerous to ignore. Now, many will attest that Drive is the far better movie, but as entertaining as it is, the core of the story and characters aren't particularly memorable. The Place Beyond the Pines packs far more punch with its haunting and effective tones, with another enticingly stoic Gosling performance right at the forefront. Number 4. Liam Neeson, Non-Stop and The Commuter. Released in 2014, Non-Stop is the second of Liam Neeson's Hitchcockian collaborations with director Jaume Collet-Serra, starring a Neeson as a down-on-his-luck federal air marshal who must locate the terrorist plotting to kill a passenger aboard his plane every 20 minutes if he isn't paid $150 million. It's a functional, serviceable thriller that's rife with red herrings, amusing villain reveals, and a grizzled Neeson doing his thing. But Neeson and the director re-teamed for the suspiciously similar thriller The Commuter. Mockingly billed as non-stop on a train, the film again cast Neeson as a sad sack family man who finds himself embroiled in a murder plot, this time attempting to stop the assassination of a key witness on board the train. Again, there are false flags all over the place, a secret villain emerging from the shadows, and Neeson improbably leaping away from a giant explosion at the end. There are obvious differences in the twisty narrative of each though, and while The Commuter was criticised for playing a little too similar to Non-Stop, it's actually a bit of an improvement thanks to its consistent tone and some unexpected social commentary along the way. Number 3. Al Pacino, Scarface and Carlito's Way. Scarface gave Al Pacino one of the most iconic roles of his career as Cuban refugee turned drug lord Tony Montana, in a ferocious rags-to-riches crime thriller that's become an undeniable pop culture mainstay. A decade later, Pacino re-teamed with director Brian De Palma for Carlito's Way, which also cast Pacino as a Latino man released back into polite society who quickly gets involved in blood-soaked drug dealings, amasses a pile of money while pining for a better life, gets involved with a beautiful blonde, and is ultimately murdered by a ruthless rival. As unforgettable as Scarface is, it also devolves into downright self-parody at times, and you know what, hasn't aged all that well if we're being brutally honest. Pacino's over-the-top performance is wildly entertaining, do not get me wrong, but his work in Carlito's Way has far greater staying power and emotional resonance. While not as iconic, Carlito's Way is a more thoughtful and gritty stab at the same type of movie. Number 2. Nicolas Cage, Ghost Rider and Drive Angry. Shortly before he committed himself to tirelessly starring in straight-to-video schlock, Nicolas Cage headlined the 2007 superhero movie Ghost Rider, playing Johnny Blaze, a man who falls foul of a pact with the devil himself, gets help from a veteran character actor, battles one of the devil's illegitimate sons, and then retains his demonic powers at the end of the movie, much to the devil's chagrin. 4 years later, Cage appeared in Drive Angry, playing Milton, a criminal who escapes from hell and invokes the wrath of Satan after stealing his prized gun. This time, Milton finds himself facing off against the devil's underling while trying to protect his granddaughter, but also being assisted by another popular character actor, this time David Morse, and eventually going back to hell amidst an uneasy relationship with Satan. Now, the similarities between Drive Angry and Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, which released the very next year, are even more potent, with Cage again venturing to protect a child from becoming part of a demonic ritual. Now, Drive Angry might not be great cinema nor have the stonking $110 million budget of Ghost Rider, but it dabbles in a similar sandbox box and delivers a far more self-aware and giddily entertaining time. If Cage wasn't enough entertainment value for you, then William Fichtner's also a total blast in it. And number 1, Shto Copley, Alive in Joburg, and District 9. Alive in Joburg is a 2006 short film created by District 9 director Neil Blomkamp, and effectively served as a proof of concept for the 2009 movie eventually getting the green light from producer Peter Jackson. The short, which you can actually watch online, is a mockumentary about alien refugees arriving in South Africa, causing massive tensions with the locals and drawing easy parallels with the country's history of apartheid. District 9's eventual star, Shto Copley, who co-produced the short, even cameos as a sniper interviewed about the situation. District 9 ambitiously expands the concept into a feature-length film, replicating the same faux documentary style, deepening the political allegory, and even bringing Copley back to star as the lead of the film. Nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Picture, District 9 is perhaps the quintessential example of a movie brilliantly capitalizing on a compelling foundational idea and doing so much more with it.